Let's bring in the Federal Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, for more on that business package. Treasurer, good morning.
Nice to be with you, Michael.
Reports this morning that this federal assistance and state assistance is predicated on the New South Wales lockdown going for a further 4 weeks. That is at the end of the current 3-week lockdown. Is that the case?
It's going to be paid on a fortnightly basis, and there is an expectation that it will go into a 4th week and then maybe even longer than that. I'll leave those decisions and announcements to the Premier of New South Wales. But our support will be ongoing as long as those designated hotspots are put in place, and the people of New South Wales, more than 5 million, are now subject to lockdown. What we've sought to do, Michael, with these payments is to provide cash flow assistance to businesses because they incur fixed costs, whether it's utilities costs or rent, even though customers are not coming through the door, and also individual household family worker assistance with a elevated payment at up to $600 a week or $375 a week, depending on the number of hours that have been lost due to the lockdown.
Okay, now one of the conditions of businesses taking this money is they don't put off their staff, either full-time or casual. I guess the big question is, how do you police that?
Well, Services New South Wales will be putting in the appropriate compliance activities and tests, and when we put in place JobKeeper, we had indeed imprisonment as well as fines, which were criminal penalties that were there to deter misconduct. Having spoken to the Treasurer of New South Wales, they're also looking at similar type of penalties to ensure that there is compliance, because obviously defrauding the Commonwealth, as is defrauding New South Wales, a criminal offence.
Now, you've got into this unedifying slanging match with the Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews on 7:30 last night. You accused him of whinging. He's accusing you of double standards. The Victorian government points to the fact, or two facts, that New South Wales workers are getting $600, Victorian workers only got $500. New South Wales workers aren't subject to an assets test like Victorian workers were. So there is a bit of a double standard there, isn't there?
Well, let me put the facts on the table. The first thing is that when Victoria went into lockdown last year, we were putting, from the Commonwealth alone, more than $750 million a week into the state of Victoria. Indeed, on a per capita basis under JobKeeper, Victoria received more than any other state or territory. We offered Victoria a 50-50 split with business and income support. They rejected it, deciding that they alone would pay for business support and the federal government would pay for income support. New South Wales has not received any more money than Victoria for the 2 weeks that Victoria was in lockdown. Now that this lockdown is an extended period, we've provided more support, business support and income support, and we've created a template that can be rolled out nationally, Michael, including to Victoria, if indeed they went to another extended lockdown.
You've accused the Victorian Premier of politicising this crisis. That's very rich coming from you, though, Treasurer. You spent large slabs of last year politicising the Victorian lockdown.
I was just pointing out the very clear failures that occurred in Victoria last year.
Making very strong political criticisms of the Victorian Premier in the process.
Well, the facts told a very clear story there. Unfortunately, tragically, sadly, more than 800 lives were lost in Victoria. More than 90% of the lives that have been lost during this pandemic have occurred in Victoria. As you know, Victoria held their own inquiry to determine who was responsible, who had made the decisions for those quarantine failures, yet that inquiry found that no one did, quite bizarrely indeed. We're now in a different stage of the pandemic. We're dealing with the Delta variant. New South Wales is in a longer term lockdown, and the support that we're providing them for the 4th week and beyond will be provided to every other state should they find themselves in that precarious situation.
Picking up your argument, should there be now an inquiry held by the New South Wales government into its public health failure regarding that airport limo driver that triggered this outbreak?
Well, they definitely need to explain how that actually occurred, because it was very unfortunate and it was wrong.
It was very unfortunate. It's gone from one case to nearly 800. It's a gold standard public health failure.
Well, for them to have a limo driver where they were carrying international air crew and not wearing a mask was something that they have recognised was wrong. They've changed the public health orders. But if you actually look at the performance of New South Wales over the course of the 18 months of this pandemic, they have managed the outbreaks very effectively and avoided some of the longer-term lockdowns.
This is very serious, so you can understand why Sydney-siders would be absolutely filthy with the way the government handled this.
I'm the first to say that shouldn't have occurred. It was wrong. The New South Wales government has recognised that and have changed the public health orders as a result.
Okay, just very quickly, one of the reasons we're facing these outbreaks is, as you keep saying, a supply constraint with the Pfizer vaccines. Given that, was it remiss of the Prime Minister not to personally pick up the phone and call the global boss of Pfizer last year to lobby for Australia to get more vaccines?
Well, the Prime Minister was talking directly to the head of Pfizer here in Australia.
Well, what about the global boss? The Israeli Prime Minister, the Japanese Prime Minister, the Canadian Prime Minister all called that global boss. In particular, the former Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, called him 30 times.
Yeah, and the Israelis weren't manufacturing the AstraZeneca vaccine in their own backyard as we were through CSL. We took a portfolio approach to acquiring the vaccines, and as you know, that was both the mRNA vaccines, but also in the case of our own domestic sovereign capability, we were seeking to manufacture AstraZeneca here in Australia. Now, there were some things that we couldn't control, namely the ATAGI advice that was affecting the rollout, the age cohorts to which the AstraZeneca vaccine could be provided. We followed that advice and then we've taken other actions, namely to secure more supply. And the good news for your viewers and your listeners is that more than 9.3 million doses have been distributed. We'll be getting up to 1 million doses a week of the Pfizer vaccine coming very shortly. And we've also seen those more vulnerable cohorts, like the over 70s, have more than 70% of people having received the dose already. So the rollout is gaining pace.
Josh Frydenberg, appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
My pleasure.